should be good now.
Right. So, hey, Noah, how's life? Great to have you on.
Thank you. It's going great.
Awesome. So we're having just attendees joining. So let's give it a few minutes and we can get started. So where are you at right now? Like where in the world basically are you currently?
Oh yeah. So I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan in the United States. I grew up here ever since I was 6 years old, traveled quite a bit during college, but came back afterwards, and this is my office. So I hope you guys enjoy what you're looking at. It's got some
super
books.
cool. Yeah, super awesome to have you here. So I think we have people on already. So welcome, guys. So today we have Noah, our guest speaker, AI expert, founder of Big Idea Content. He's going to talk about creating an online course with ChatGPT using AI tools. This is going to be a great session. Thanks, Noah, for being here. Great to have you on the call. So I guess without further ado, you can get started. Maybe introduce yourself a little bit. And you guys, those that are watching live, feel free to drop questions down in the Q&A section. And then we're going to address all your questions at the end of the call, unless there's something very pressing that you'd like us to address. So yeah, Noah, all to you, and let's get cracking with creating an online course with ChatGPT.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So creating an online course with ChatGPT, folks, just to give you guys a brief introduction of my experience. Like I said, I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan, but my career essentially started back in 2018 when I started selling gutters for a local contractor called All Gutter Systems. While I was working there, I recognized the need to create kind of a new solution for contractors that enabled them to create estimates through drawing a picture. So I found a local CAD company called ArcSite. Been around for about 4 or 5 years, but they were really struggling kind of with bringing their product to the market. So I introduced the concept of converting it from a drawing tool to an estimate tool to the company. And from there, the company very rapidly scaled. So right now they're doing about 10 million in revenue or so, possibly. After that, I left and started my own thing called Big Idea Content. Basically, I write content and write stuff for all sorts of people and companies. Was hired to write a book with a very successful entrepreneur in the area called Brian Elias. Afterwards, I served as a fractional VP of sales for IP Quality Score. And currently, and this kind of segues into our topic today, my latest customer is actually a rain gutter association that wants courses created for gutter installers and salespeople on safety and then really how to do their job. So when Darius mentioned he was looking for people to talk about AI, I was using AI to kind of create this course. So I thought it might be a good fit. And that's what brings me to the table today. All right. Oh, actually, I should touch on this. So so outside of just using an AI tool, you are probably going to need to use some other softwares to kind of basically complete your course. The technology isn't at the point right now where you can just type in what you want to talk about and then it creates a course for you. You still need to take all the material that you're going to be creating in ChatGPT or whatever AI tool you're using, plug it into something else. So for my course specifically, I'm using a lot of graphic design tools like Canva, Google Docs, and even CAD tools to do it. So AI is probably not going to be enough to actually fully create your own course, but it takes a good amount of the writing off your shoulders. So I'm prefacing everything that I'm saying with that. So before we get into the how-to, let's talk about the opportunity. The online learning marketplace has shifted quite a bit over the years. So previously in prior years, and really before COVID, the space was dominated by companies who marketed softwares to corporations who needed some type of learning management system to onboard new employees. However, during the COVID era, that kind of shifted a little bit. Now there's a lot of websites out there that enable creators to build courses on topics they have a lot of experience in and basically monetize their knowledge by selling it to groups of people. So currently the global online education market is valued at $198.2 billion. and it's projected to reach 602 billion by 2030, according to the Global News Wire. So if you can carve out a niche for yourself in this space, it can really be quite profitable. I would imagine most people here have heard of Andrew Tate. He is the founder of Hustler University, but you've probably, if you're on Instagram or TikTok or even Facebook, you've probably seen his face. He's a tan, bald guy with a huge beard. He uses his social media presence to really push his Hustle University courses out there. And that's actually how he makes quite a bit of money. So if you're familiar with that name, you're familiar with someone leveraging kind of this space to monetize their game, if you will. Now, for you guys, and really for anybody, this marketplace is going to enable you to monetize your skills and create a passive income. So if you are an entrepreneur, that's really great because you can find ways to make money while you sleep. Lots of ways of doing that, from renting houses to writing books to doing online courses. But passive income is the best kind because you don't have to ever work for it. And courses are just an easy way of doing that. But a big advantage of coursework is that your coursework can be repurposed and remonetized over and over and over and over again. So it doesn't just have to live on the online space as a course people pay for and do. I mean, you can take all that material that you put together using ChatGPT or whatever tools you were using, and you can format it to sell it as a book. You can put it in social media posts, videos, even physical products, and use it to book consultations. And all that kind of can coalesce to help you become a thought leader in your field. So if you have a unique voice, if you have a unique experience, a great way to start monetizing that is by creating an online course, because it's a lot of work. But when you're done, you're going to have a huge, huge breadth of content you can pull from moving forward for your own purposes down the road. So that can help advance your career. It can help with your reputation. It can even bring new customers on board as part of an overall marketing strategy. So there's a lot of benefits to doing something like this if you have the time and you have the mental headspace for it. All right, so before we go into how to use ChatGPT to create it, let's talk about selecting your topic, because that's really going to be kind of the thing that's going to set you apart from everybody else. So like a lot of things in business, I would argue that the best topic is going to be at the intersection of three different things. So proficiency, demand, and fun. And then right in the middle there is going to live your course, what you're going to actually talk about. So proficiency, you can probably measure how proficient you are at something by asking yourself some questions. First off, what do people ask you about? Do you have a unique perspective or experience, and why should people care about your opinion? So for me, people come to me all the time with business ideas for associations, networks. They want my opinion on sales. But I also have friends asking me about, hey, how do my gutters look? Because they know I used to sell gutters. So proficiency, you need to be good at something and adept and have a breadth of knowledge to actually teach a course on the subject, obviously. So proficiency helps you kind of help isolate what the course should be about if you're going to go down this road. The next thing to look at is demand. And this is probably going to be the trickiest thing to measure. But here's a couple kind of ways to figure out what demand can look like for you. So first off, is there a community surrounding the topic? So when I say community, what I'm talking about is kind of the infrastructure of the industry. So for instance, with gutters specifically, over the last 4 or 5 years, there has been I would say there's been about 6 Facebook groups that have cropped up with thousands of members. There's conferences now. So there's this kind of social infrastructure that is new to the field that's emerging, where a course might really kind of fit in because you can plug it into that infrastructure to actually get it going. But not every topic is going to have a community like that in it. So before you decide to teach a course on something, maybe take a look to see if that social infrastructure has been built out. The next way to measure if there's demand for a service is if there's competition. So a lot of people, when they're new to entrepreneurship, believe that competition is a bad thing because that means that you have to compete for the same kind of pool of business, if you will. Really, I look at competition as a proof of concept. If you are plugging into a space where there's already demand for the service, there's probably going to be other people that observe that and they decided to take the initiative and create something of their own. So it's just a good measure of proof of concept. Next question to ask yourself with regards to demand is, can you effectively market the course? Marketing is hard. Marketing isn't built for everybody. Not everybody's good at it or has the mind for it. But creating just a course it probably isn't going to be enough. You're going to have to find a way to sell it. That's kind of what Andrew Tate was really good at, right? Marketing himself, being kind of controversial, going on podcasts and such. So look at yourself, think about if you can effectively sell the course maybe before you create it. Otherwise, it might just kind of die on launch, and nobody wants that. The last good measure of demand is, can you get someone else to foot the bill? So for me, I'm getting paid to create this coursework. It's one of several things I got going on, but they're paying me quite a bit to do it. So if there is really true demand for this material, someone else might actually just be willing to invest in you as you knock it out. So that's also a very, very good measure of demand, in my opinion. All right, last thing is fun. Hey, do you enjoy talking about this? Do you like people in the community? Are you willing to commit to the project? If you're not having fun writing your course, other people are going to be able to tell when they're taking it. And they're probably going to disengage with it pretty quickly, which is going to cost you revenue down the road. Ideally, your course is going to be long enough and have continuing material added to it as time progresses to keep people engaged so you can keep earning that revenue. Everyone's familiar with annual recurring revenue. If you can build that into your course somehow through a subscription, that's huge. So, last but not least, make sure you choose something that, you enjoy talking about. For me, I love gutter company guys. It's kind of a frat bro industry. It's a lot of people doing less than $2 million in revenue. It's usually their first business. So they're just fun people to kind of be around and help out. And it's really not too complicated. Once you've installed a couple gutters, you kind of know how it goes. All right. So first thing you're going to do, if you decide to create a course and you have a great topic to discuss, the first thing you need to do is plan your course. And of course, planning, kind of like when you're writing a book, takes the form of an outline. You need to basically write down every single topic that you want to discuss. Now, for my rain gutter course, there was a lot of material. So I divided up into 3 stages roughly. This took about 2 weeks. I used a digital whiteboard and Canva to kind of outline everything. But you can see here on the left, these little yellow cards, and we're not going to zoom in so you can read that, but I'm just trying to give you an idea of the scale here. Each one of those yellow cards represent a topic that needed to be explored in the course, so people had a good understanding of how to start their job as a rain gutter installer or a salesperson. So these cover everything from sales practices and methodologies to architectural features of houses, like how roofs are constructed, what drip edge looks like, what fascia is, material science like aluminum, copper, all that stuff, and how to work with those materials and how to work with them together. So, and at the bottom, of course, there's a business plan. You really want to take a look at this top part. After I had all these topics written down, the next thing I did was try to build out some course material from them. So I took each one of these cards and plugged them into, again, a different whiteboard, but put all these in here. So each one of those ideas was explored just a little bit more. And then the last thing I did was consolidate all these ideas into courses that we can now monetize. This whole process took about 2 weeks. And there's a case to be made here that maybe it should have even taken a bit longer. But before you start writing any type of material, you want to plan every single stage of it for several different reasons, not the least of which is that it helps you create a roadmap of content. This roadmap of content is really important for several reasons. So one is if you run into some type of writer's block with one lesson or course, you can pull back, separate yourself from it, and then take a look at the outline to see what else you can maybe write about that day or week or whatever. But a really effective roadmap will also help you see kind of where you are in terms of progression. So are you 30% of the way done with writing this thing? Are you 50% of the way done? Are you almost there? You won't know unless you have a roadmap kind of documented. And if you take a look back here, you're going to see that in this stage 3, I actually have different colors kind of indicated. Those help me measure my progress in each one of these courses. So green means the course is effectively done. Red means I haven't quite started yet. Yellow maybe means I'm halfway there. So I can take a look at this to get an idea and tell my customer, hey, here's kind of about where things are at. And I can give them weekly updates that are true to the material that I've written. So that roadmap is super, super important. As I mentioned earlier, this is kind of where the bulk of your effort should go. The bulk of your effort is probably not going to go to actually writing the material because AI is going to take that off your shoulders. The bulk of your effort is going to go into kind of what you write about and where it's placed in the scheme of things. The goal of this outline essentially is to put all the puzzle pieces on the table. So then you can ask ChatGPT to write lessons on the material and then just plug it in to the content or the course itself. So the best analogy, I think, really is kind of assembling a puzzle, if you will. But you can really go deep into the outline, and that is actually really important. So outline what kind of points you want to make, what kind of evidence you want to use, if any, what analogies you want to use, metaphors, strategies, all that stuff. And if you have an idea of how each lesson should flow, when you start using the AI tool, everything will just come together. Really, you want the process of actually writing this kind of stuff now to feel very, very, very repetitive. You want to make it feel like you're slaving away at a computer, just typing prompts in, maybe editing them, putting them into coursework. And if it feels repetitive, that means you're not using all your headspace to kind of do your job. But that's good because ChatGPT can just take that off your shoulders. So it should feel monotonous. It should feel repetitive. That's how you know you had a really good outline kind of in place. Now, you don't need to create the outline yourself. Actually, sorry, I skipped a slide there. This is really how content creation has irreversibly changed. So I'm sorry, being a writer isn't enough anymore if you want to make a living doing content creation. You need to learn how to use these tools. You need to focus on the outlines. You need to focus on what kind of media you want. And then you need to learn some other skills to kind of make it anymore as a writer, in my opinion. All right, now ChatGPT can help you outline your course. So you can insert a prompt in it, for instance, like outline a lesson for gutter installers to help them prepare for their first day on the job. And you can kind of see it'll make a mock outline here for you. Honestly, before ChatGPT came around, this might be enough to get by with creating a monetizable course. I'd argue that you probably need a little bit more depth of experience to really make it anymore. But yeah, you can ask ChatGPT to create the outline and then ask it to elaborate on individual points, of course. So I did that in this example prompt here on the right. And then you can plug these different topics into the outline that you create on the digital whiteboard. Now, keep in mind, of course, that ChatGPT won't have your experience, your skill set, or your voice. So in the process of using this, I've kind of realized that the tool as it exists now tends to gloss over technical details or prioritize concepts that aren't important. So if we're teaching a course on how to install gutters, for instance, these installers need to know what type of sealant to use, where to apply it, what type of screws to use, how many brackets need to be placed on runs of gutters. ChatGPT, for whatever reason, doesn't know any of that information. So it still requires quite a bit of expertise to kind of put together. So in my experience, you will need to supplement whatever outline provided by ChatGPT, if this is the route you're going to go, with experience from people in the industry or yourself. All right. Then again, take everything, plug it into that whiteboard, and then you are ready to go. But if ChatGPT can outline everything and you have nothing else to add to it, you probably selected the wrong topic. My suspicion is that, as these tools progress, people will be able to ask them to create a course for themselves. If you think about it, that does actually make sense. Like, hey, I'm getting ready to install gutters in a couple months. What do I need to know? And can you teach me? They might just ask ChatGPT that, right? So if you're going to make it long-term, you're probably going to have to bring something else outside of this AI to the table. So if you are just fully relying on this to create a topic, then, maybe think about doing something else if you're going to still create a course, or market the hell out of it so you can make your money now, I suppose. All right, so the next thing after you've created the outline is you want to select your platform. Now, there's two different platforms for these courses. First off, and I mentioned this earlier, there are LMSs or learning management systems. These essentially allow you to create and host courses on a website of your own. The other way to sell your courses is to put them onto an online learning marketplace, something like Udemy or Coursera. You can kind of think of these like YouTube for education. There's a lot of content creators that live on these platforms that sell their material. And that's kind of all they do. Whereas, an LMS is, hey, this is your own brand. This is your own thing. You're not being plugged into you're not competing with attention for anybody else. So there's pros and cons to each one. We're just going to discuss really the pros here. So an LMS allows you to market and direct people towards a website with your product and associated material. That means you have complete control over your branding. These are typically white label solutions, meaning you can have your own structure to the website. You can have your own colors, logos, everything. It's not being directed elsewhere. You also have full control over your pricing, strategy, and promotion. And you can obviously create targeted marketing campaigns like Google ads or YouTube ads or whatever to kind of establish a brand identity and bring people right to your website. So as a result, you have better control over things like customization, where you want things to be plugged in, how you want the site to look. You have a lot more control over that kind of stuff with an LMS than you would with an online learning marketplace. And the nice thing is you can keep 100% of your revenue. So whatever people pay to access your courses, that's your money. No one else gets to see a cut of it. The only thing you pay for is a subscription, and those typically run, anywhere from $30 a month to something like, $300 for really top tier LMS solutions. So pretty affordable once you start selling those courses. All right. Online learning marketplace is going to, again, using the YouTube analogy, that's going to give you access to a large established user base actively seeking courses. So with YouTube, a bunch of people watching videos all the time, you can throw something up on there. It'll probably get viewed. You can use the same analogy with your courses. You have thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people accessing these sites every day. So if you just throw something up on there, yeah, people will see it. They might still not buy it, but you're at least getting some exposure, right? You're also benefiting from the marketplace's credibility and trustworthiness. So you already have some people's buy-in going in this thing, whereas with an LMS, no one's going to know who you are if you're even qualified to talk about the topic. A big benefit of an online learning marketplace is it requires less expertise to set up, which in turn translates to less time to get it going. And once you've created the videos or text or whatever, you plug it in there, you upload it, and then it's monetized immediately. However, the big part, the big negative about these websites is that they take a significant cut of your revenue. In my experience, anywhere between 10 to 30% is going to be paid to the online learning marketplace. So that can be a huge cut, but they run the website. They have a right to ask for whatever bit they want. So just something to keep in mind when you decide what you're going to do. All right. So now that we've kind of figured out what we're going to talk about and what platform it's going to live on, now you're going to start implementing your coursework. The first thing you want to do, other than creating the outline, is select what voice you want the course to be in. So this goes back into how content creation has changed a little bit. Before, you used to write everything yourself. So you would bring your own voice to the table, and that actually might be why you were successful, right? Well, a better way to do it now is to select someone else's voice and then have all the coursework be written in that person's voice. So for instance, all right, if you're writing a course on philosophy, just to use an example, it would probably behoove you to select the voice of a famous philosopher to write all the material in. So you might say, hey, I want to talk about good versus evil in the style of Jordan Peterson. And that might be what you use to actually prompt ChatGPT to start outlining and writing material for you. But there's all different sorts of voices you can select. The one I'm using for my gutter installation course is Mark Manson. Mark Manson is a dating coach. He's crass. He writes at like a third grade level. But I'm talking to gutter installers, guys. So I need somebody who is funny, maybe curses every now and then, to just kind of be at that same level. So when people are reading this, they can actually relate to the content. So here's some guidelines I put together to help you select what voice you're going to use. First off, the education of your reader. Gutter installers typically didn't go to college. I don't knock that, but they just typically didn't. So the reading level isn't going to be as high as someone who did, typically on average. Also, take a look at influencers or authors they may follow, the average reading comprehension, expected attention span, and their expectations, which you can either align with or subvert depending on the tone you're going for. I went with the subversion category because I know gutter installers aren't going to want to sit in front of a computer and read something. So it kind of made sense for me to kind of surprise them a little bit with the tone. But you actually might want to align with the expectations of your readers when you create your own course. So just something to kind of ponder over. I would recommend doing some buyer persona research to discover people's favorite influencers when deciding on a voice. So you might ask them kind of what their watering holes look like, where they're going to learn things, what books they read recently, some of their favorite books, maybe what YouTube channels they follow, and then do some research to kind of see if you can use ChatGPT to kind of create the coursework in that person's voice. So some examples: Mark Manson, Daniel Pink, Neil Strauss, Jordan Peterson. Mark Manson, again, crass, short, to the point, kind of funny, uses some jokes in the material. Daniel Pink is a very clear writer. He tends to use evidence and examples to kind of build out his points. Neil Strauss is one of my favorite authors personally. He's written on a ton of different topics, but his writing flows very well. It tends to be a little bit more personal. And then we all probably know who Jordan Peterson is. Very philosophical, uses stories and allegories to kind of make his points. So these are just some examples of voices you can use. You can probably think of some yourself that would be really interesting. So here's like a lesson on dating in the voice of some different authors to kind of give you an idea of the power of this type of prompt. So you can kind of see here, write introduction to a lesson on picking up women in a bar in the style of Mark Manson. You might think it's all about being sleazy or manipulative, he says, but we're going to focus on genuine connection and honest communication. Whereas if we put that same prompt in, but we ask it to write in the style of Daniel Pink, he talks about approaching the social challenge with an understanding of the science behind the motivation, communication, and attraction while maintaining the utmost respect for others. But if I ask it to do that in the style of Neil Strauss, it's a little more straightforward. But finally, if we do it in the style of let's see here, Jordan Peterson, he talks about psychological principles, personal responsibility, and respect for the innate dignity of the individual. Just reading that, you can kind of pick up on the subtleties that kind of make this course content live in the style of the person I selected. So I do recommend doing this up front. That's why it's one of the first steps, because this will enable you to stay consistent with your tone throughout your course material. So one of the mistakes I made, because this is a new field, was selecting my voice of Mark Manson about a month in. So now I need to go back and kind of rewrite some stuff, which isn't a huge deal because it's ChatGPT, right? But I need to go through and redo it anyway in the style of Mark Manson, so it's consistent. So just do this up front. Knowing to do it is just super helpful, obviously. All right. So once you've selected your voice, stage 2 is actually using ChatGPT to build out these topics. And in the scheme of the last point, remember to write in the style of before or after your prompt. So yeah, I mean, really straightforward. I would imagine if you're in this group, you already know how to use ChatGPT, so I'm not going to cover how to use it. But just tell ChatGPT what you're writing about, who you are writing to is also important, and then what style voice you would like it written in. Your prompts can really get fairly long and exhaustive with ChatGPT. A lot of people, when they first start using it, they maybe write, 1 or 2 sentences. Some of my prompts go up to 3 paragraphs long. I'll outline kind of what I want the course to, how I want it to work, points I want to make, how I want it to flow, if I want emojis or not even. And then it kicks out the material, which I can then take, plug into what I call, just copy into like, Google Docs or Microsoft Word or something, refine it, and then just continue prompting ChatGPT and copying that into the Google Doc. And then I take that material and put it into the course itself. So that's kind of the flow I've been following, just ChatGPT on one tab, Google Docs on another, copying material into that, editing it down, then moving it into the LMS. So yeah, that's kind of how it's currently working. Because of ChatGPT and all these AI tools, I think it's really important to have a heavy emphasis on photos and graphic design, because that's not something that, or maybe I just don't know how to do it, that ChatGPT can do right now. So I take a lot of the material and reformat it so it lives kind of in a visual space, if you will. And that supplements the material generated by ChatGPT. So I'm a big fan of Canva. That's what I use for this presentation. Canva also has a ton of stock photos built into it. If for whatever reason you don't like that, you can always go to something like Shutterstock and then pay for photos with a subscription. Some of you folks are probably pretty good with tools like Midjourney or DALL-E. That's the Midjourney logo over here. So if you're proficient with those tools and better than I am with them, you can probably create some course material using AI tools or not a course material, images using AI tools that would work pretty well for you. But yeah, I do think it's important to kind of use that stuff in the creation of your course. You can see here, this is a screenshot from one of the courses I was doing. I use a stock photo from Canva here, and then did some graphic design work. This maybe took 10 minutes to put together, but that's living right at the top of the lesson. So when people log in, the first thing they're seeing is not just a huge block of text in front of them, because that could be intimidating depending on who you're talking to. And again, if you read through some of this, you can definitely see Mark Manson kind of bleeding through in the style. It's a kick-ass course. If you look at the bottom here, the nitty-gritty of inspecting your team's handiwork like a boss. No one's expecting that kind of tone and lightheartedness when they're taking a course on gutter installation. So I like that. I think it works well for the material. So because of ChatGPT and how fast it can kick out content, you can probably expect to spend most of your time actually assembling the media. So used to be you would spend all your time doing the writing, and then media was kind of an afterthought, because that wasn't enough to kind of be competitive and put something out there that people would consume. I suspect that's going to change quite a bit. Now it's probably going to be all about the media, the face-to-face interaction, the graphics, the overall experience. So I would probably budget, that's important to you, 3 to 5 times as much time on media as you will on the actual copy and putting the content together itself. Just a quick note to keep in the back of your head. All right, so now you have the LMS selected, you have the outline, you've created the course content. The next thing you're going to do is actually create exams, right, or assessments. This adds interactivity to your course. It helps your students measure their success and learning comprehension. Depending on your customer base, if an employer is paying for this kind of stuff, they want to know that people have mastered the material that they paid for them to learn. That's kind of what I'm dealing with in this particular project of rain gutter installation and sales. So thankfully, it used to be you have to write assessments yourself and think of questions, think of content. Don't have to do that anymore. You can just ask ChatGPT to create the assessments for you. And, it's super easy. All you do is you say, hey, write 10 multiple choice questions based on the lesson material you've created in this chat, mark correct answers. You do that at the bottom of the thread, and then it'll spit out a multiple choice questionnaire kind of based on whatever material came in front of it. If you have a separate conversational thread in ChatGPT, you'll write a similar prompt to this, but at the end of it, you'll just copy and paste the material in there, and then ChatGPT will create the questions for you. It can behoove you to double check the answers. I've noticed that sometimes on the more difficult questions, it selects the wrong one for whatever reason. But once you're done, you copy and paste it into your LMS, and it looks something like this. And then the assessments are, pretty much done. Afterwards, you launch it, and this is really where I don't have experience yet. I haven't yet launched this course. It's going to be a couple months out until we do. Maybe we do another webinar at that point about launching your online course, I suppose. Before you launch, however, it's probably going to behoove you to do some marketing. So I went ahead and asked ChatGPT for some great ideas on how to market an online course using all the prompt experience that I've had, and came up with some pretty good ones. We're actually doing some of these. So leveraging social media, email marketing, blogging, affiliate marketing, all that stuff. So lots of ways to market an online course. If you guys have an entrepreneurial spirit behind you, you might have some experience on there. what I got a question here from Kang Aviv. What is a good apps for quiz? So for the quizzes, this is something you're going to want to look at when you select an LMS. So I looked at about 5 different ones. We did go the LMS route. I should preface everything. I went the LMS route for what we're working on because this course material lives as part of a rain gutter association. So I didn't want to put it on Coursera or a mastermind site or something like that because that would feel less like an association, more just like, again, a YouTube channel. So your LMS should have a quiz element kind of built into it, or an assessment tool of some kind. So you don't want a separate app for any of this stuff. You want all to live on the same tool that you're going to be using. So I'm using LearnWorlds that has an assessment builder built into it. So, but that should be built into your LMS. All right. So any other questions or comments or thoughts?
Awesome, Noah. Thanks a lot for a great call. And also just to add to Kang's sort of question that you answered. So totally, if you go for assessments, obviously, ideally it's within your learning platform.
Mm-hmm.
However, if by any chance they meant a quiz, as in like a front-end quiz, I guess it's a good idea to look at like software as in Interact, for example. We use Interact for our front-end quizzes. And there are multiple ones, but I guess based on what you had said, and the question the person might have referred to assessments, and in that case, yes, ideally you have it within the platform. So in our case, for example, we use Kajabi, and even for our language schools, and all the assessments go there, because you want to sort of have it paired up with the modules, right? Yeah. Cool. And okay, so then guys, if you have any questions for Noah, just drop them down in the Q&A box. And meanwhile, I'll probably follow up with some questions that have come up for me whilst Noah was talking. So Noah, at the beginning, you kind of showed the breakdown and the digital whiteboard, as you called it, that you sort of prepare when you're about to sort of like, when you're mapping out a course. Could you sort of talk about the process of like whiteboarding, if that's a word, and how do you sort of like, do that part basically, and how do you even use Canva to do that as well? Because that looks quite interesting, actually.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can close this presentation, and we can dive right into that exact whiteboard so you can get an idea of how I do it. And I'm not saying this is the right way. There's probably tools that do this specifically that I'm just not maybe familiar with, but we'll hop right into that whiteboard so you can kind of see what that process looks like. So this is the digital whiteboard in Canva. You can kind of easily create these yourself. You can kind of see there's different revenue channels that I'm kind of working on, but coursework, Rain Gutter Association is the big one. All right, so again, I'm working with a couple different folks. I actually have a whole gutter company kind of behind me to help back all this material up. So I was picking everybody's brains to kind of get an idea of what the topic should look like. Once I had a good topic, I would write it down. I would just go to text over here, pop in the topic there. Now, just having something written down, it doesn't really make it stand out. So if we maybe go over to an empty part of the whiteboard, and it's just hard to see, hard to count. So I added a square kind of behind it. I just went to lines and shapes and then moved those over to make it pop. And you can see I changed the color behind it to yellow. And then when I was ready to kind of progress to the next stage, I think I duplicated that existing whiteboard and then started to organize these into lessons and kind of build out content around each one. And then the last thing I did, as I indicated in the slideshow, was put that together into these courses, if you will. So the nice part about doing it this way, by the way, is let's say, like I have 3 different tracks here. There's one on safety, there's one for installers, and there's one for salespeople. There is some parity between the coursework for the installers and the salespeople, as you might imagine. If you're going to be selling gutters or installing them, there is a common body of knowledge to both of those. So what I can do, if I create something that also belongs in both, I can just put it down once, copy it, and then move it over here under the salesperson's track in this case.
Right, so it's kind of sort of like, sorry to interrupt, it's kind of nicely sort of mapping out the learning journeys. And if you have multiple courses going on or multiple curriculums, right, you can sort of move around, shift around and see where you want to place a certain step, right, or piece of knowledge as well.
Right. And I mean, let's say you had someone foot the bill for the course like I did. This is really useful for that person too. They're your customer. They want to know how things are progressing, if you're behind or ahead. In my case, I'm a little ahead. But this gives them a nice, really good visual of kind of the track you're on. So yeah, Canva is not really a planning tool, but I mean, it works pretty well for this, I'd say.
Right. And at which point do you personally bring in ChatGPT to sort of work with? Do you already use ChatGPT to break down and map out the content, or do you then only bring it in later once you know what the content is that you need writing out?
Sure. So this isn't, of course, on ChatGPT specifically, but I mean, to answer your question, I kind of think of ChatGPT during this outline phase as someone to bounce ideas off of. So I'll ask it, hey, what is a sample outline for a course on selling gutters? It'll bring that list of topics to the front, and I can kind of pick and choose which ones are relevant in the larger scheme of things, and then pop those in here. Now, because of ChatGPT, I think it is really important to do a deep dive into outlining. So knowing what you want to discuss, knowing how you want to discuss it. I think that the more time you spend on your outline, I mean, ideally your outline might have like 50 points or something for a single lesson. But again, that enables you just to plug each one of those points into ChatGPT. It writes the material, and then you just move it over. So spending the bulk of your brain power on that outline, I think is going to be huge for anybody writing any type of material moving forward. I just think that's the way I see these tools being used.
Awesome. And then how do you then, so you're planning out the course this way, sort of like using ChatGPT as a sort of tool to brainstorm. Does this course then, is this a video course? Is this a text-based course? What's the sort of format in this particular example that you're giving?
Sure. So in this example, right now, it's all text. All right, there's some visuals, photos we've taken from the company that I'm using and stuff. So there's quite a bit of photo stuff, and again, some graphic design stuff that I've been putting together. However, there is a really heavy video element to it as well. But we're going to be knocking all that out at once. So I'm probably going to have a list of like 30 videos we need to shoot. Rather than just doing those intermittently, I think it makes sense just to do it all over the course of a week. Here's a really simple example of like a graphic design I put together detailing kind of different parts of a gutter system. So that is some of the graphic stuff, but yeah, like I said, I mean, the graphic design, the media component will probably take you a lot longer than actually assembling the course if you follow the process of outlining and doing all that I laid out.
And then there's also an interesting sort of piece of advice that you gave, was sort of using ChatGPT to create assessments, because there's one of the things that I guess is quite time consuming once you've built out a module or a course. So in your case, you would have like written out, flashed out the course or the module within ChatGPT, and then you would sort of go back in and say, well, now, create an assessment for this particular module, right?
Correct. And I was actually going to pull up one if you wanted to take a look. All right. So yeah. So in this one, you can kind of see the live thread of me creating a course using ChatGPT. So you can see here, I'm here, write the introduction, follow up the intro by just talking about this next point. As the course is being written, I'm having questions kind of pop up in my own head that I maybe assume other gutter installers will kind of think of, right? So we ask ChatGPT to flesh those out, move that into the thing. And then at the end, I just put that prompt in, and then it creates the starts creating the assessment here. I think I stopped it halfway through because I got caught up in something else.
Right.
But yeah, sometimes questions will be repetitive and you'll have to ask it to write a couple more, or maybe ask it to write a question on something specific in the course. But yeah, this is a really effective method of creating online course material. My first assessment, I didn't even think of doing this, to be honest with you. I wrote it out by hand because I'm 33 years old. I've been writing stuff for 33 years. And then after I was done, that took like an hour. I'm like, wait, why didn't I just ask the software to do that for me? And I said that moving forward. There's a lot of those kinds of epiphanies that I've been having as I'm using them.
Sure. Because, for example, we have multiple language schools, and up to sort of ChatGPT era, we had been creating both the classes and the class content, but also the assessments. And assessments would often take quite a while because you kind of need to strategically think through as to, like, if you had taught a module on a particular tense, like which questions would you be asking? What are the answers? Like, what do you want so having ChatGPT do that, it saves like at least a couple of hours for our team and teachers. And also another thing that I really liked about sort of like I'm trying to draw attention on certain points that I thought were very interesting. And also, if anybody wants to add in and ask questions, please do so in the Q&A box as well. But also, like, you gave some really nice advice around finding a voice, or like deciding or picking a voice rather for a course, right? And how did you sort of, for example, when you now write this current course, like, have you played with different voices until you found one, or was it like, did you get it right from the get-go, picking the right voice? Like, what was the process, for you to get that?
Sure. So I tried a couple different authors. Well, I mean, first off, I use ChatGPT's default voice, which is none. And so when you do that, neutral, I think that's a great word to describe it, right? So, but another way you might describe it is kind of corporate-y,
for sure,
boring. It just kind of lays out, stale. Sure, and it was sufficient for what I was doing, but then I realized, boy, if there's a way to spice this up a little bit, maybe we should be doing that. So I think my first one was Daniel Pink, I think was the first one I tried. I didn't think that was interesting enough. I maybe tried Ryan Holiday after that. He's written a bunch of stuff on like Stoic philosophy and stuff. Didn't think it was a good fit. So I started just looking up, like, okay, what's a really colorful author, maybe someone who cusses a little bit. Mark Manson came to the top of the mind, and then I started plugging things in his voice. And at that point, I really thought that the text started to pop. So that was my process. I mean, just really trial and error, I suppose.
That's pretty cool. And also in terms of, like writing, obviously you focus quite heavily on writing the right outline to get the answer that you wanted to. So did you create the entire, or have you been creating the entire course just based on, like knowing what you want the course to be? Or did you have any, like, I don't know, stock content or content that that company had that you had them put into ChatGPT and then sort of worked from that point onwards? Like, what was your process there? How did you get to,
Sure.
result?
It depended on the course. So for the installer course, there really wasn't any existing content in text format that I could find that really did an exhaustive job of detailing what people need to do and what the expectations are. For salespeople, I've worked with a number of companies on their sales playbooks. So one of my clients is a company called Refloor. They have a big, doc, like 50, 60 pages or something, all in like hard format of sales practices they expect their salespeople to kind of go through. So I was able to use some of that material, plug it into ChatGPT, ask it to rewrite it in the voice of whatever, and then use that in the coursework. So yeah, it depended on the module specifically, I suppose, but that's kind of. Did I answer your question? I think I lost my train of thought.
No, for sure. I'm also like thinking, I'm mindful of the people who might be possibly in more sort of extroverted industries, meaning they might have videos, they might have produced podcasts. So it's always a good idea to transcribe those, meaning get an AI tool to transcribe those, put them into ChatGPT, and then deduce them to an outline, deduce them to so key takeaways, and maybe use those then to turn that into a course as well.
Yeah. And actually, to your point, so I have a client who's come back around wanting me to work on a second book. And I'm going to be following that exact process. We're going to be having these Zoom calls. I'm going to be plugging the transcripts into ChatGPT, asking it to create an outline of the discussion, and then plugging that into something like, again, Canva, digital whiteboard, outlining things, coming up with ideas, how I want things to flow, and then just moving that into ChatGPT. So it's still a time-consuming process, but what you're spending your time on looks a lot different now. It's really, really interesting. I used to spend, several hours a day just writing out content, editing it, doing all that. That's gone. That's behind me. Now it's all about pulling and extracting the right kind of information and then moving it into this software to really build it out. It's kind of like you're building a body by going through the bones first, assembling a skeleton and then putting the meat on top of that and the skin and all that stuff. That's a good analogy for a serial killer, but yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
A good Netflix show. I mean, in terms of those watching or the recording or live, I know that a lot of our sort of members, do their own online courses. They are mentors, coaches. So I would always, encourage to sort of go through your archives and see what pieces of content you have, because you can even like use a blog post and sort of, then base it on that and create an entire module based on a particular blog post, a particular audio, and see what you already have, as opposed to having to create everything from scratch. So yeah, and then the work is so much faster in that case, or at the same time, if you had produced your course on ChatGPT, you can then, as you said at the beginning briefly, you can then turn that into an ebook. You can turn that into a video, a YouTube script, whatever that would be.
I think, and actually to your point a little bit, but to add on to that,
yeah, sure.
One of the things you can do, and I really should have put this in the slides on that, I'm thinking more about it. I mean, you can do things that are fun to really liven up the course quite a bit. So for instance, like poetry, acronyms and all that stuff, you can use ChatGPT to kind of do that. So let's say we have this dry course on gutter installation, kind of boring. Well, what if we put like a Seussian like poem in it about like, hey, what are the steps you follow, all that stuff. And yeah, kind of weird. This is just an example of what you could do to kind of liven things up. I'm a big value guys when it comes to business culture and all that stuff. So before I even go into the coursework, I have people memorize an acronym. Let's see here. Trying to find it. Oh, here we go. All right, so I had different acronyms that I came up, or that ChatGPT came up with, and we introduced the course by going through these. These aren't the ones I decided on by any stretch, but you can see install, integrity, navigational skills, safety, technical expertise, attention, there's things that seem really creative on the surface that I think that give people a good idea of like what to expect walking in, and that they're not just stepping into a really boring kind of grind fest they'll have to drag through for the first couple of days on a new job.
For sure. I mean, I love the idea of poems as well in a course, and obviously provided that your industry would accept it or tolerate it. But yeah, it's quite funny to see that for the gutter installation industry have a poem, which is pretty cool. Yeah. So there are so many possibilities, I guess, that we couldn't have thought of or have done prior to ChatGPT, right? Yeah, super awesome. Cool. So I don't know whether there are any more questions. It seems quite quiet in the Q&A section. Yeah, so in terms of what's coming up next, guys, so on the 25th, so that's in a couple of weeks' time, we have another awesome AI expert coming in to talk more about, he's a developer, so he will talk sort of about deep AI and sort of like behind the scenes of ChatGPT and how ChatGPT really works. And we're going to sort of do some deep dives there. So that's super exciting. And yeah, and I think today's call was really good, a good sort of incentive to start thinking about how we can be using ChatGPT to be putting courses together, or use the courses that we had put together to repurpose them into ebooks and other formats that we could be putting out, selling, and so forth. Is there anything else, Noah, that you feel that you might not have mentioned and you'd like to sort of talk about, or are you good? Are you sort of happy with what we've covered?
Hey, I think this is pretty comprehensive. I think one other thing to potentially mention, LearnWorlds is a really good learning management system. If you guys are looking for a place to start, it sounds like you guys are using Kajabi from what I heard earlier. Podia is another really good LMS. So there's a handful of these. Ask ChatGPT what your needs are, and then ask it what its pain is, and hey, that'll probably set you down the right road. Yeah, I think that about covers it.
Yep, super awesome. So yeah, thanks Noah, and thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you in a few weeks' time on another call, and yeah, have an awesome day, everybody. Thanks, Noah.
Thanks.